Silver and Black Media presents Zakariah, Lincoln Kennedy, and Lorenzo. Tune in to Raider Nation, #1 station.
Touchdown! Raiders!
Just win, baby.
Raider Nation, welcome to the program. It is the Silver and Zach podcast. How you guys like that? Silver and Zach. You see what I did there? The Silver and Zach podcast with yours truly, Zakariah, and two very hella, as you would say in the Bay, special guests. To my left is Lincoln Kennedy. If you're bored sometime, Google the coincidence is of the presidents Lincoln and Kennedy. It's some weird, crazy stuff, but that happens to be his name. Also check out when he went in the stands after a fan that hit him with a snowball in Denver. He doesn't like to talk about that, but that did go down. He's a three-time first-team All-Pro, the anchor of the O-line for the Super Bowl appearing Raiders in the 2002 season. He's also an actor, so I don't know if you knew that. He's been in the movie The Marine, and he's been in 2.5 Men. Most importantly, you hear him every Sunday or Monday or Thursday or Saturday or whatever on Raider Nation and radio broadcasting the games along with Brent Musburger. He is the one and only Lincoln Kennedy. Big Link, what's cracking?
Oh, man, I can't call it, man. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me, baby.
We're going to talk some draft. We're going to talk some Raiders offseason. And then on my right, he's the man known as the one-man gang because he basically could do everything on the field, Swiss Army knife and all that jazz. Two-time Pro Bowler, All-Pro. Most importantly, former standout at the #1 public university in the world. That would be the fantastic University of California, Berkeley. He is Mr. Lorenzo Alexander. What's up, Zo? What's good?
No, I'm doing well, man. Just out here chilling in Phoenix, man. It's a pleasure to be on today, especially with my man Lincoln Kennedy, man. You know, big brother right there, led the way. I got to grow up watching him play on Sunday. So big ups to you, Link, man, and just appreciate you having me on today.
I'm good to be with you, Zo. Appreciate you having me, man.
Yeah, for sure. Both of you guys don the silver and black. And then me, you know, first team All-League in high school, won the J.D. Banks Award and the Clarence Blankenship Award for, excellence in athletics and academics at Contra Costa College, you know what I'm saying? So those are my accolades, but that's neither here nor there. All right, gentlemen, let's get into the draft. I want to start, both of you guys had long, successful careers in the NFL, but your draft process was a lot different. Zoe going undrafted and Lincoln, Big Link, getting drafted in the first round. So I just we'll start with you, Link. Just tell me what the experience was like, the combine. Do they really throw you? It seems like they throw you through a washing machine and then the dryer and then figure out they got you in your drawers. You got to run, you got to lift weights, you got to do all this stuff. What was the draft process like for you?
Well, first of all, let's back it up for a little bit because the draft process was somewhat different for me than it is to today's these guys coming out. The thing is that most of these guys don't really understand what it's like to be drafted. They go through the combine and go through the entire process. A lot has changed since I went through the washing machine, if you will. But I will say this, for the guys that are coming out today, it's really somewhat different. The draft, the combine, everything, all of that is really different for a lot of these guys because they don't go through the same thing like we used to. It's really, the process is extremely different.
Link, man, just keep it real, keep it 100, man. Just say that these the players got a little bit more power, and these owners in the league is treating them a little bit better like human beings and not like they used to. Just keep it real.
Well, I mean, you're right. It is what it is. I mean, so much has changed. Since I went through the process 20-something years ago, 30-something years ago. But, for what it's worth, I wish these guys the best. I know what it's like to be on that stage, to be in that green room, to be waiting for your name to be called. And for a lot of these guys, geez, I mean, I couldn't do it again. I really couldn't do it again. It was, I don't even know how to put it in words. It's just it's that exhausting, if you know what I mean.
And for you, Zoe, I know you went undrafted, but it ended up working out for you fantastically. You had a great career. Assuming you went through the combine. So tell me what that was like, because it was, obviously later than when Link did it. But then also during the draft, if you thought maybe you were going to go in the 4th or 5th or the 6th or the 7th round, not getting drafted again, you got signed as an undrafted free agent. But what was it like for you?
Yeah, I guess, starting with the end of the process after I had went through it, I definitely thought I would get drafted, at some point, maybe a second day guy. I definitely didn't have first or second round written on my resume, but that was okay. But I went through the process, again, I came out in 2005. It had probably improved a little bit. I think the league moves slow in that regard as far as just how to treat people, but it still wasn't, it was a harsh conditions, right? You know, you walking up shirtless in your shorts and you got people whispering about what you look like, body type, and, you know, all those type of things, measuring you, just kind of standing on in front of all these coaches and scouts as they kind of look at you and trying to figure out what type of specimen you are and what type of athlete can you be. You know, some of the questioning that you get in some of the meetings, you know, just trying to push you and see how far over the edge you could go, how you would hold up, you know, just a whole bunch of things, stressful situations, putting you through the medical. I think I had to be in there, what's that, an MRI machine for like 4 or 5 hours. You did the little quad thing. I forgot what it's called, the Betamax machine, something that tests your quad, hamstring strength. And then they want you to go out and then perform and then devalue you if you don't perform at the highest level after they just put you through all this stressful situation. Yeah. So it's definitely not set up for you to succeed. We used to call it, especially as the PA, it's like a devaluing system, right? Because at the end of the day, owners want to be able to get elite talent at the cheapest price. And so if you can drop a little bit, somebody can draft you in the second or third round instead of the first round, that benefits them, right? And so for me, that's what that whole process always felt like. Today, it's a little bit different to Link's point of view. You know, it's a moneymaker. Obviously, they've grown it. Players, I think, have a little bit more control as far as, hey, I'm not coming or I'm not doing certain things. If you had that stigma on you back in the day, it was just a different vibe of control they had. So things have changed, I think, for the better in a lot of ways. Now, you know, obviously some of the old school mentality, some of the things the young guys do, I can't get with, but I definitely like people taking control of their careers. Now, what they do with that is a little different. But overall, you know, I will never watch the draft from beginning to end. Again, that's what I had to do. People say, did you watch the draft? Did you look at it? Like, nah, why would I ever sit down and watch that? It ain't even football, first of all, right? It's just a stupid process for me because of my experience and then kind of what you see, how guys are treated. I mean, even in the draft when I was on the call, I got a couple of teams called, or one team called me and was like, hey, we're going to take you with the next pick. Obviously, that didn't happen. And so just the interactions and just the devaluing and the lying that kind of went through my process, I really didn't like.
Wait. What round was that?
It was late. It was probably the 6th round, 6th or 7th. So, I mean, it benefited me not to get drafted because I got to choose where I wanted to go as an unrestricted free agent or undrafted guy, but still for somebody to actually call me and say they're going to take me with the next pick. I understand the dynamics that happens in the war room now, but don't call a young man or a kid before y'all know for sure, right? I mean, it's just my whole experience was soured by it. Obviously, I got over that. I was able to put together a good career with being around great men like Lincoln and other guys that I've had an opportunity to play with. And so able to overcome it, but it definitely wasn't my greatest time in the league at all.
That is, I can't believe you full-blown got a phone call and they said next pick. I mean, that is ridiculous. That is so unprofessional. I know you're not going to name names, but that's crazy to me. Anyways, just getting to the draft, we're going to get to, you know, so you mentioned teams like to get talent late because it saves them money, which the Raiders had no choice but to draft late because they traded everything for Devontae Adams. We'll get into the offseason also, but I just wanted to get your thoughts. I mean, first of all, the Jets everybody gave them an A++. They just knocked it out of the park. But I wanted to ask you at the top of the draft, because I thought there wasn't like a big QB, you know, only one QB taken in the first round and then a couple in the second, you know, third and fourth, stuff like that. But it wasn't like most drafts where it's like, do you draft Peyton Manning or Ryan Leaf? It wasn't about the quarterback at the top, but I still found it intriguing between Trayvon Walker and Aiden Hutchinson. And I just wonder from both of you guys, Link, I'll start with you. They're both defensive ends. One had the numbers and the consistency. The other guy has what GMs and coaches love to call upside. I just wonder if you were a GM and you were making that choice, do you go with the more proven commodity or do you go with the guy with the higher ceiling?
Well, let me break this down like this. You know, we saw the fact that a lot of teams in the draft this year, or a lot of teams had their quarterback, so they needed to go to quarterback. So unlike it was in years past, you needed to draft essentials, and you need to get a rush in. You need to get somebody who's going to be able to provide, you know, pressure on the quarterback. And I think that's what you saw this year. You saw this year, especially with the draft, with the defensive guys that were drafted. I think Georgia had 5 guys going in the first round. Yeah, and it was going to be like that. You had the commodities where you needed to get guys who could apply pressure on the quarterback, provide defensive pressure. And that's where you are these days. We'll see how this turns out. But, you know, for the For the most part, guys, most of the teams in the National Football League have already had their quarterbacks. They've got their guys.
But Link, you got to answer my question. Do you go potential or proven? Because one guy had the stats and the consistency. The other guy is a guy that everybody thinks could be one of the best pass rushers in the league. So, like, if you were the GM,
if it were me, I would go with it. You know, you draft your board. Hutchinson, I played against his father in the Rose Bowl back in the day.
Really?
So, yeah, we went against each other because his father was a defensive end in Michigan back in the day when I played in '92. So I think that it's a proven commodity when you talk about Hutchinson, that next sort of tier, if you will. I like him. I would have picked him number 1 overall. You know what I mean? But he went number 2 he's going to Detroit.
Yeah,
he's right there. Yeah, so you know, it is what it is. But I look at these guys, and when they're coming out, and who knows? I never put much emphasis in the rookies because you got to prove me. You got to prove it to me. You know, before I give you that anointed, you got to prove it to me. So, but at the same point, I think as far as the ceiling is set, I think he's right there.
Zoe, what about you? Potential or proven?
Right. Yeah, it's always hard. And I think I always go to the tape, right? Because you talk about numbers. Numbers can be deceiving, right? And, you know, we hear about the cat out of Georgia and why he didn't have necessarily the same type of numbers because he was rotating in and out more than Hutchinson was, right? And so if I get more opportunities to play on third downs, I'm going to have more sacks, right? And so that's what it comes down to. And I think you have to really have good scouting that can go in there, look at the kids, see what they are, because technically they could be the same type of player, but Walker may have more athleticism. So that's why it sets him apart, because they can say, okay, this kid can really run, get after some stuff, and really take things to the next level. Not to say Hutchinson is not going to be a 10-year pro as well, but I just know, you know, just like Al Davis, right? If you could jump 40 inches and run a 4.2, I'm going with you all day because I can find the spot because you're just so athletic. I can move you around and you can be a gifted athlete and be dominant versus a guy that is more cookie cutter, maybe have great technique. But when you get to the level of the NFL, sometimes that stuff can be, what's the right word? I guess equalized in some ways just because you're just not talented enough, right? You may be a step slower. You may not be as strong because you're playing against bigger, better talent. And I think that's why sometimes you see people go off of the ceiling versus a higher floor because they say, hey, I can coach him up. This athleticism, I can't coach that. So let me do that, where one guy may be closer to the end versus another guy that has a lot more capacity and is going to now have more opportunity. So I think he can be something a little bit more special. So everybody tries to project. And I think I probably would be, if I watched the film and they both were talented, but one guy had more room to grow because he may be a little bit raw or didn't have the same opportunity, I'm going to go with that guy probably with the higher ceiling.
Yeah, I'm with you. And great example on Al Davis, which worked for him in his younger days. But then when he got older, remember famously, he busted in the draft room. There was both Crabtree available and Hayward Bay available.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, who had the faster 40? And they were like, Hayward Bay, but Crabtree's better. And he's like, I don't care, draft Hayward Bay. So it didn't work out as he got older. And I'm not going to say senile, but a little bit up there in age, you know. But in general, I think I'm with you because you make a great point, Zoe, about Trayvon Walker. He was going in and out. Their defense was so damn good that he wasn't constantly playing. And so, like, you're going to be able to see what he's going to be able to do. Plus, let's not forget, he played in the SEC. And comparing that to the Big Ten, you know, it's a big difference. So in terms of the competition that you're going up against. So I think Jacksonville, if I was Jacksonville, I probably would have taken Trayvon Walker. But I think the Lions were – did you see this, by the way? The Lions put in the pick like 2 seconds after they were on the clock. And the NFL got mad because they wanted them to stall it out, you know, like make it go longer. So they got like, I don't know if they got reprimanded, but they definitely got spoken to.
It's all about that money at the end of the day. But you know what? I actually know the D-line coach down in Jacksonville, Brenton Buckner, who was in Arizona. I actually played with him back in the day. He's a really great coach. So I know he's going to be able to get Trayvon Walker to get down there and get him coached up. And I expect to have him have a big season out of here because I know Brenton Buckner and his coaching ability.
Yeah. So anyways, I found that to be interesting. And then, yeah, of course. But here's my thing. If the NFL wanted to fix that, even if Detroit put the pick in 2 seconds after, they could have just waited to announce it, you know, because they want to go to the analysts to break down, you know, the first pick and then get into who could go. But so just wait to announce it, you know, like it doesn't go straight from the Lions to the podium. It could go from the Lions to the NFL, and then they can decide when they want to come out. Anyways, I just found that funny. Moving on to the Raider draft. Obviously, 1s and 2s and all that good stuff. the move to get Devontae Adams. So they didn't have their first and second round pick. They didn't pick until the third round, and they picked Dylan Farham. I'm not going to pretend like I know college football like the back of my hand, but he's a guard who can project as a center, which is what the Raiders need. They need a lot of offensive help. I mean, they had either the lowest or the second lowest grade if you go into like, Pro Football Focus or whatever. If you break down like their offensive line was atrocious, and they tried to fix that with Leatherwood. He didn't have a good season. I'm going to go to Link in terms of the offensive line. Link, you can tell me what you know about Farham, and also you can just talk to me about the offensive line as a whole from last year and how much of a liability that was.
Well, let's break it down in some semblance. Alex Leatherwood was a disaster, mainly because they brought him in as a tackle. They had to move him in a guard. He's a project, a work in progress, if you will. I still think he has the ability to be a good offensive lineman. He just needs to work with his hands. And I'm not there teaching him. I don't know what they did with him this offseason. But I've often said that, he needs to be like a boxer. He's got to learn how to box with his hands, how to move his hands, how to shift his hands, rather than keep him stagnant. Because what he did egregiously throughout last year is he would hit his hands out there and he would keep them there, and he wouldn't be able to bring it back. So that worked to his, digression. So I still think he can be a good offensive lineman. I still think he can be a good lineman in this league. He just needs to train himself better. And I'm hoping that this time will. But they needed offensive line help. So I thought it was wise of them to draft a guard. More importantly, we'll see what happens with Denzel Good, how he comes back. But I think the offensive line, if there's anything on this offense that needs work, it is the offensive line. They've got everything else. They've got all their pieces. They've got their running back, they've got their quarterback, they've got the receivers, they've got everything else. They just need offensive line help. And so it'll be interesting to see how they're going to come out this season, especially in preseason. And I say that tongue in cheek, guys, because I don't know how this coaching staff is going to treat their veterans in preseason, if that makes sense. Gruden didn't play his veterans, during preseason. So it'll be interesting to see how they come out this year. When it's all said and done, I think what the first game is the Jacksonville game and the Hall of Fame game. We'll see who they play.
So real quick before I go to you, I want to ask Link one question. Link, you say they have everything on offense, but the offensive line. I feel like in football, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like you can get away with not having the best running backs in the world. I feel like you can get away with not having the best tight end in the world. I feel like you can get away with not having the best wide receivers in the world. But the two most important things is you can't say, they have everything but a quarterback. We've seen that with plenty of teams. The exceptions being, when Trent Dilfer won with the Ravens because their defense was so good, and when Brad Johnson won with the Bucs because their defense was so good. But in general, you need an offensive line and you need a quarterback. So saying they have everything but the offensive line, they've got to get this shored up. And they don't have any more salary cap. They spent that in other areas. But Link, if the O-line is no good, you can't go anywhere, right?
Look, let me just keep it simple, okay, guys? You're not moving anywhere if you don't have an offensive line. It's just that simple. Right. You're not going anywhere if you don't have an offensive line. Now, this team has, over the past couple of years, been able to put themselves in a position where, they've been able to do without. They went to the playoffs last year without having a good offensive line. It's not going to happen again, especially in this division. It's not going to happen. So they have to get the offensive line figured out one way or the other. And I think this year they're going to be able to do it. So, you're not going anywhere without an offensive line, guys.
Yeah, and to that point, we got to remember that, two veterans that they were dependent on, Richie Incognito, right, had a big-time injury, and so he wasn't available and has since then retired. And then you let go or trade the best center in the game, Rodney Hudson, who I've been around. And if you take just him alone, you taking him out, the communication, the leadership, right, the accountability there, of course, your offensive line isn't going to be good. Those are two big pieces that they were probably dependent on. And when you remove those guys, you're going to have some inconsistencies, especially when you're trying to interject young guys. And I'll say I agree with Lincoln on the Leatherwood case, because a guy named Wyatt Teller, right, all-pro guard for the Cleveland Browns. I had an opportunity to play with him when he was a rookie. And I used to beat this cat like a drum in practice. And he'll tell you that, right? It's just what you do. He's a young guy, doesn't quite know the speed of the NFL. But he had to develop, and he developed into an all-pro guard. And by the time, he was going to his second, third year, you could see the consistency. You could see the footwork because of all the reps that he got and the confidence that he was able to build. But to Link's point, he was training to be an offensive line. It just took a little bit of time. for him to get there. And so I think guys, if they're coached well and they're humble enough to realize what they need to work on, they could become that player. We're just in this society right now where if you ain't that rookie year or that second year, up on to the next. But let's give this guy a little time to develop. And then also, offensive line for me, I think about the Giants because I played for the Washington football team, or the Commanders now, for a long time. And I got to see the Giants, considered one of the best offensive lines in the league during that era of probably 05 to like 2011, 2012. And individually, the guys weren't world beaters. They weren't Lincoln Kennedys, right? They didn't have a ton of guys that you say is going to be a Hall of Famers. But collectively, because they worked well together, they communicated, they came off a double team, scoop blocks. They worked really well together and understood what they needed to do within the scheme. They were considered one of the best in the league. And so that's and it's hard to do that now, right? Because guys are constantly moving. But having that continuity, continue to develop individually, and then collectively, hopefully the Raiders will have a shot coming into this year because some of these younger guys have had that time to develop and create that continuity with one another.
On the flip side, from the defensive end standpoint, Zoe, how quickly do you know going into a game? Like, do you already know from watching film the week before? Or is it something that you said when the game starts? How quickly do you know this is going to be easy peasy or this is going to be a tough day?
If you're doing anything as far as film study, and most coordinators, and you'll see this now more so in this era, that they're going to find the fish and put their best defensive lineman, and I don't care if it's a defensive end or a D tackle, on that guy. So sometimes that's why you'll see Aaron Donald line up at end, because the weakest player is that right tackle. So I'm going to put my best pass rusher on your weakest player, and vice versa. If I have a defensive end, he may slide inside because a guard may be their weakest player. And so watching film, you normally can identify who that guy is within the link, and then collectively you know what games or what moves you can use to beat the guys. Now sometimes the film can fool you. Maybe you caught a guy that had a bad couple of games and he comes out because the coaches pumped him up about what type of pass rusher you are about him, and you challenged him. But generally speaking, you kind of know what you can do and get after guys and know when it's going to be maybe a 2-sack day versus this is going to be hard sledding all game, and I'll be lucky to sniff the quarterback. So you can kind of figure that out depending on, watching your film study.
So, Link, we talked about how important the offensive line is. To me, it's right behind quarterback. I mean, you saw Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl when his O-line got decimated. The Bucs just, he ran more yards than he threw for, or something like that. They showed like behind the line because he was scrambling for his life. So just to put like a bow on the offensive line, if you're looking at it right now, Colton Miller, we would all agree, was probably the one consistently good offensive lineman last year, right? Then you got Denzel Good, showed some good, no pun intended, and showed some bad. Andre James, you got Illuminor, Leatherwood, you talked about we need to see a big jump. But if you're looking at Farham, he could be a guard, he could be a tackle, he could be a center. Where do you see him? Because it sounds like he's going to be competing for a starting job. Where do you think is the biggest need for them on the O-line?
I really think that they have to figure out a way to find a place for Alex Leatherwood. Now, I think Leatherwood can play tackle. He just needs to be trained. His brain needs to be reshifted back out to tackle. I think Farnham can play guard. I think they need guard. I think they need interior help when it comes to this offensive line. Look, the thing is about the Raiders' offensive line is that it needs some sort of continuity, and it needs some sort of consistency. Offensive lines are better when they play together, and they need to be together for a while. This offensive line is a work in progress, whether it's Alex Leatherwood at tackle, or whether he's at guard, wherever it is. I think they need to find a place. They need to find some sort of consistency. And the only way it's going to happen, guys, is if they get out there and play together. You got to put the pieces in place, and you got to go out there and play, because it's not going to happen by imagination. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen, whether you're writing it down on a chalkboard. You got to go out there and do it.
All right, well, let's move on to the fourth round, and the Raiders select Zamir White out of Georgia. Now, on the surface, I'm guessing Raider Nation was scratching their head, thinking to themselves, we've already got a deep running back room right now. But you scratch the surface a little bit. Kenyon Drake recovering from last year's broken ankle. Josh Jacobs has failed to appear in every game in each of his first 3 seasons in the league. Zamir White was projected to go maybe late, early third, and they got him in the fourth. So what do you make of that pick? I mean, can you have enough running backs when your O-line is so bad? I would just think, even if you had Zamir White as a second rounder and you're like, oh my God, he fell to 4. I would just think that even if there was an O-lineman there that you didn't have on your draft board as high as you had a running back, you would just go O-line there just to try to get a decent O-line for next year, because as Link said, they had everything else. What'd you make about that pick?
Yeah, but you also got to understand running back shelf life isn't that long in this league, especially from perspective. And you already said, Jacobs has been hurt every single year, right? Drake as well. And so you always are preparing for that transition. And maybe you do have this guy, Zamir White. Maybe you had him, on your board pretty high third rounder, maybe late second, depending on how your board was going to fall. And so you want to bring a type of guy like that in to compete with some of those veterans, right? So they can continue to push and become better and don't get complacent as far as being comfortable. And that's, just the way GMs think. And so you always have to be preparing for that next time, because those other guys are going to get paid at some point. And so it's always a shuffling match. And so, yes, you may have a need somewhere else, a more glaring need, but also running back in some of these other positions where you have guys that may be a little bit older, especially in the running back position, which you age a little bit quicker because of all the hits, that you want to bring in a guy that you feel like is a steal in the 4th round that can come in, push these guys, and then give you a little bit of more youth and some juice in that position room.
You have to read between the lines. The fact that the Raiders did not pick up the 5th-year option, it led you to believe that they might want to go a different direction. You know what I'm saying? The thing is that these days, especially, much as those point, it's running back by committee. It really is. It's running back by committee. And there's not one, if you've seen the pattern with the NFL, there's not one guy who's going to be the main guy. You're going to have a lot of guys add to that point, because let's face it, especially the way the Raiders go. I mean, it's not going to be one guy. It's not going to be one guy who's going to be the main focus guy back there. And a lot of teams have taken that on themselves. It's not going to be one guy.
Yeah, well, it sounds like both of you guys agree with taking the best player available as opposed to addressing a specific need. I'm so paranoid about the O-line. I would have gone O-line even if it was a guy that I didn't have projected in that spot. But I hear what you're saying. Gone are the days.
Yeah.
Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders. It's, they're just rotating. As Le'Veon Bell found out the hard way, although he did get paid by the Jets, but he had to sit out a whole year because teams are just not valuing running backs back in the day like they used to. When Emmitt Smith sat out, Jerry Jones went for they started 1 and 2, and they were like, okay, here's your contract. Running backs were a lot bigger back then, and especially with McDaniels coming in, and we'll get into that coaching change in a minute. Obviously, he loves utilizing the running back as they did with James White and all those guys in New England. Yeah. But I just, I would guess the casual fan scratched their head when they drafted a running back with their 2nd pick, but 4th round, but 2nd pick overall. Okay, so their next pick in the 4th round, Neil Farrell. So they traded up from 126 with the Vikings, and they took their pick back by trading 2 of their 5th round picks. So they must have really wanted Farrell. He's 6'4", 330, nose tackle, not big pass rush, but he claws the lanes in terms of defending the rush. I like the pick. Again, I'm obsessed with the offensive line. So I like the pick. Obviously he played for LSU, so he played against, the toughest competition in college. He had 45 tackles, 9.5 tackles for a loss, 2 sacks, and only 12 games played. But yeah, 6'4", 330. He's aggressive. I like it, but again, I would have gone on O-line. But what'd you guys make of that pick?
You talk about those 9 tackles for loss, man. That's significant for a D tackle to be able to push the pocket like that in the run game and get after guys and be a difference maker there. Obviously, again, you worried about the glaring need, but you also have to have a football team, right? You can't just get all offensive linemen and then you look up and you haven't built a well-organized football team. Obviously, with McDaniels being his first year there, he has some time. And so he has to groom and kind of figure out what he wants. And for them to trade up, they really like this kid. And so if he's dynamic in the run game like that, put the opposing teams, when we think about who they're going to be playing, in 3rd and long, versus 3rd and 4 to 5 that are manageable with the quarterbacks that you're going to be playing, you want to have a guy that has that ability to get off blocks and make plays in the backfield to put the offense behind the chains.
The big thing is what we're seeing, especially at the defensive line, is you got to see somebody who can push the point. You've got your rush ends who can collapse the pocket. but you need somebody who can push the interior part of the pocket. And that's what is big these days. So many guys, you're talking about defensive tackles who can push the pocket, who can accelerate the pocket, push the point, because you're going to make those quarterbacks move out of those spots. You've got, defensive ends that are going to rush the end and you're going to force the quarterback to step up in the pocket, but you need somebody who's going to push that pocket. And that's big these days. Defensive tackles that can be aggressive in the interior part of it. That's what a lot of defensive coaches looking for.
Yeah, and then going to the 5th round, they stayed with the D-line and they drafted Matthew Butler. Everybody says it was great value, 3-tech defensive tackle after taking the nose tackle. They actually needed defensive tackle more than they needed a nose tackle. He was projected to go in the 4th, and they, not only did the Raiders get him in the 5th, but they traded down before taking him. And everybody says it's an outstanding value. They were curious as to how he didn't go in the 4th or maybe even earlier. 6'4", 300 pounds. He played for Tennessee. Again, SEC competition. He's fast. He projects as a dependable starter down the road. Probably a guy that's going to rotate in and out his rookie year. But I like the pick. Again, offensive line is obviously the worst part about this team. But if you stack your defense up, and you have all those other weapons around, you can hide some things. So I like the pick. What'd you think, so?
Yeah, again, you got to build a well-rounded team. And so there may be some things that the coaches have seen in like OTAs in the camp with the offensive line where they feel like they have some pieces or maybe have a better perspective as far as who they had compared to last year, right? And so, again, you have some pieces there that we've already talked about that they're counting on developing in the offseason. And so you have to have guys on the defensive end. We talked about Max Crosby and Chandler Jones on the outside, but what about the interior guys that's going to allow these guys to be able to turn the corner, like Link said, and push the pocket in the run game? And these guys also rotate, right? D tackles rarely play the entire game. They maybe play, let's say, 25 to 35 snaps, and they're rotating in and out. And so you have to have a nucleus of guys that you can depend on so there's not a significant drop-off when another guy is in the rotation. And so you want to bring in guys, like you said, people thinking about why he went 3rd, went to 5th instead of 3rd and 4th. Well, there you go, a value pick, a guy that we can plug and play that can really help our football team be young up front and get after guys in that rotation that we want to have.
If you guys go back a couple years ago to when Philadelphia won the Super Bowl, one of the big things that was their contribution to their success was being able to rotate their defensive front. Now, they had a defensive front of a rotation of 8 guys that were constantly going. And the reason why that proves that their success is because they were able to rotate those guys in and out. So much to Zoe's point, that's what the Raiders have been looking for. They've been looking for a rotation with these defensive guys, especially defensive tackle. They didn't have it last year because they had a number of guys that would get in there, that would play, that would end up getting injured and wouldn't be able to last the second game or go on. But they're trying to create that. So much of their success, they want to have that. Not just so much a defensive end, but especially a defensive tackle.
Yeah, and you got Crosby, and now you got Chandler Jones on the ends, and then you get a run stuffer, hopefully a nose tackle, a couple of tackles on the side that could provide some pass rush as well. It's going to look like, and believe me, they're going to need it with the Chiefs, and now the Broncos getting Russell Wilson, and then up and coming San Diego. I'm always going to make that mistake. Up and coming Chargers, they're going to need it. So I'm not mad at that at all. And then my favorite pick actually came in the 7th round. Munford, he was deemed the best value pick of the draft for the Raiders, 3rd best value of the 7th round by any team. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I know a bunch about him, but I'm reading his stats. He allowed just 1 sack and 1 quarterback hit in 2021, and that's against good competition. Meaning, I'm expecting this guy. I don't know if he's going to be a starter. Obviously, guys that are drafted in the 7th round, sometimes they don't even make the roster. But that stat just by itself, only allowed 1 sack and 1 quarterback hit in 2021. Link, can you ever say you only allowed that in a year?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My bad.
Probably multiple times.
My bad. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but beep, beep. Anyways, here's the thing. You want to add to the value, and I think that the Raiders had to really look at that this year. Because not having the first 2 picks, they had to do their evaluations and they had to really do their homework on who they were going to take and when they were going to take them. And this is a great value pick. It really is. Now, for him to come into the camp and he's got to prove himself, he's got to go out there and show his value. You're right. When you think about it, Zach, Most guys that are drafted that late don't necessarily make the team. They got to earn their spot. But because he had such high value, he has a greater chance of making the team, and he just has to go out there and prove himself.
Yeah, I mean, again, when you get down to that late, a lot of times guys are just trying to find diamond in the roughs, guys that can come in, and if they make the team, great. If not, maybe we can stash him on the practice squad and develop him for a year or two. And so when that contract, some people, when you think about the draft, it's not all about immediate production and play. Sometimes you have to, it's a little bit of game theory. And let me think out 2 to 3 years, as we're going to see with this running back, Britton Brown as well. Thinking about out 2 to 3 years out, what does my team look like? Can this guy be developed by then with the coaching staff that we have? And if he doesn't, if maybe he does supersede our expectations, then great, we're ahead of schedule. But a lot of those times you're drafting guys 6th, 7th round to be developmental players, guys that you can see growing into a starter role or a swing guy, or as in the running backs case that we're going to talk about, a special teams guy, right? Guys that can be depth fillers, that can be special teams. Maybe he's a third down back. Maybe he's a rotational guy. When somebody gets hurt, he can play a little bit more, like a la Tywan Jones, who played for the Raiders for some years, that's up in Buffalo now. And so it's not always about getting the superstar or the guy that's going to be every down starter, but guys that can fill those supportive roles, swing guys, special teams guys that allow your team to have some of that blue-collar feel that's going to carry you and get you past when guys get hurt, or in some of those tough games where you need a big play in the special teams or a guy to step in if a guy goes down in the middle of the game.
Yeah, you know all about special teams. I believe, was it Coach Gibbs that said Lorenzo Alexander is the best special teams player? If he doesn't get special teams Pro Bowl selection, I don't know who will. Yeah. So
that was that was my man. Yep.
And you mentioned Brown. That was their final pick, running back out of UCLA. Again, a little bit of a head scratcher, but yeah, like you said, it's running back by committee. You can't have enough of them. Overall, I think based on what they had, because a lot of people were wondering, did they give up too much to get Adams? But if you look at the draft, all the top receivers were gone by 18 overall, and the Raiders' first pick would have been 22. So they wouldn't have been able to even get. And who even knows if that wide receiver is going to be what Devontae Adams has already proven to be? They've obviously had a whole huge overall when it comes to linebacker. I thought maybe they could have got a cornerback in there, but really, I mean, they are putting an emphasis. They got a couple of linemen, couple of defensive linemen, and then, a couple of running backs. And I mean, overall, I thought based on what they were working with, I thought they did a fantastic job. Link, for this new organization, the new people running the show for the Silver and Black, what did you think overall about the draft?
Well, I will say this. I think that they had to do what they had to do to get Devontae Adams. And I'm not mad at them. Really not. Because you get a star receiver like that to accompany your quarterback and your offense. I think that this offense is set. Really is. When you talk about receivers, tight ends, and everything else, they've got it. Figure out the offensive line. Figure out what pieces you need to make this offensive line work. But you have a complete offense. And you have a quarterback that has, let's face it, there's no reason why they can't be successful. And you talk about in this division, it's hands down. It needs to work right now. I'm not mad at them, because if you look at what teams have done around the National Football League, you look at what the Rams did last year. They gave up a lot to get Matthew Stafford. They won the Super Bowl. It's win now. We're not pacifying for 2, 3, 4 years. Win right now. There is no reason why Derek Carr can't win right now. That makes sense. Okay. Yep. So
but don't say that to Zach now. Don't say that. Go on and tell him how you feel, Zach. Don't sit there and be silent. Tell us how you really feel, huh? Yeah. About my guy.
I'm a very big Carr apologist. He's dealt with a lot of stuff. Don't get me started on last year with that tragedy with Ruggs, that historically pathetic offensive line. Carr is not the problem. But to Link's point, this year, even though they didn't address the O-line as much as I wanted, there's not many excuses now. You got your college teammate, Devontae Adams, coming in. You got, you got all this talent. You added pieces on the defensive side. You got a new coach, new system. I mean, how much turnover has he had? I just can't believe there's Raiders fans out there.
Your tune is real different right now, but that's all good.
But and he's a saint, quite literally, Christian man. And he took he took a team-friendly deal with his extension. So, but yeah, I mean, this year, I can always make excuses for Carr because the division's going to be very, very tough. But yes, this year, I mean, he did the playoffs last year in a very volatile situation where you got the head coach sending out sexist, misogynistic, racist emails. You got your star wide receiver getting a DUI. You have a historically bad, and he still made the playoffs. So how can you hate on my boy?
Okay.
But yeah,
I'm glad. Thank you. I appreciate you, Zach. Your tune has changed since the last time we spoke about my guy, D. Carr. You sound way different now. I appreciate it. I'm glad he's proven you and brought you over to the right side. But I've been telling you this the whole time. The dude is a winner, right? He just has to have support around it. It's not one guy that does it. The organization has had a lot of ups and downs, as you just named, about that you had to overcome.
No. I'm the one that always defends Carr.
No, you didn't.
Yes.
This is your thing about Carr. This is your thing about Carr, and I'm gonna hold your feet to the fire on this. This is what you used to say. When things are going great, he's great. But when things aren't, he's not that great. And last year, things were not great by any means, and he found a way to get that team to the playoffs.
Yeah, that's true. Okay,
but
what I say about him,
you've been a Carr lover now. Hey, this kid, you have not.
With all my friends that love the Raiders, I've always been the one defending him. My one criticism.
When we did our hold on. When we was doing our podcast, right? Me, you, and my other man. His name is escaping me right now.
OC, you're confusing me with him. You're confusing me with him.
That was OC and not you.
Yeah. OC. No, I've always been the one defending Carr.
Okay, I don't know. I don't know.
No. The only criticism I have is that.
Let me interject this, okay, guys. And I've seen Derek Carr. I've been critical of him many times. Matter of fact, I think he removed me from his Twitter feed because he didn't like the way I would say things.
You got blocked?
No, I got blocked. Let me just say this. You know, I've been critical of Derek for many reasons. My thing is this. I think he's as capable of a quarterback in the National Football League, capable of any throw, capable of anything. I wish he would use his legs more, but that's neither here nor there. When it comes to leading this team, I think he's the best thing for the Raiders, mainly because they have a quarterback. When you have a quarterback, you have a chance. I think Derek's a capable quarterback, as capable as any quarterback in the National Football League. However, there's got to, I appreciate the fact that he gave sort of the home field discount, if you will, to re-sign with the team. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the fact that the Raiders don't have to go and look for a quarterback. I think Josh McDaniels, the reason why he was hired was because he had a plan for a stagnant pocket passer. He showed he had a plan because he had a plan with Tom Brady. This is a quarterback who's not going to use his legs. And so I believe that's one of the reasons why the Raiders wanted to hire him. He had a plan for a quarterback like Derek Carr. I appreciate the fact that they went out and got, Devontae Adams. I appreciate the fact that they've got everything in place. This offense is going to be good, and it has to be good because this is a division that is going to be challenged. I mean, we're talking about old. I mean, you got to turn back the clock to go back to old NFC East when these guys used to beat up on one another. When you had the Giants and the Redskins and the Cowboys used to beat up. That's what this division is going to be. That's where they are right now. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I know if you have a quarterback, you have a chance. Now, I will say this. I still think that, as much as I love Derek Carr, he's the fourth best quarterback in this division.
No, I can hear that, but I'm not mad at that when you're talking about two Hall of Famers and a potential, all-pro type player. I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing that you fourth within that group.
Now you just got to go out and compete. You got to.
Yeah, but I would say this: I don't think D. Carr has ever had a receiver as good as Devontae Adams on his team. Maybe I'm wrong. I can't think of anybody that's been that dynamic. I know Devontae Adams is a defensive dictator, right? And so he's going to clear a lot of things up for that offense, the reads, the pre-snap reads that they're going to see, because you have to dedicate at least a person and a half. I would even almost say two guys that's going to be around Devontae Adams at all times, just because how dynamic he is. And so you're going to see a lot of, I think, things just open up even more so for this offense, because of what they have to do. Maybe even, be able to run the ball at a higher clip because you're going to see a lot of 6-man boxes because of what Devontae Adams does. And
Yeah.
DC will have a clearer picture, I think, a lot earlier as far as getting the ball out, being able to do some things, because I have played against the Patriots offense, right? McDaniels and what he did when he had Tom Brady. And so they're going to be very multiple. One of the things I really like about this, they don't just have an offense, all right, we're going to roll this offense out every week. We're going to dictate to the defense based on what they do bad. So we're going to attack matchups that we know that we can win and manipulate that. So whether that's pass concepts, run concepts, whether we have to run the ball 50 times or pass the ball 50 times, that's how we're going to beat you, because this is your weakness, and we're going to attack it and make you stop it.
Right there. Yeah, you've got all the intangibles there for you. I mean, you got with Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller and everything else.
Yep.
And even Josh Jacobs, what you can do with the running game. I mean, there are a lot of intangibles what makes this offense, at least on paper, seem a lot more noteworthy. And adding the Devontae Adams and the quarterback with Derek Carr. I think that the potential is all there. It's a matter of refining it and making it work. And I think it starts up front, obviously, with the offensive line.
Of course.
You got to be able to protect the quarterback. You got to be able to protect the quarterback. But you have the intangibles that where you can do. There's so many things that you can do with this offense. It really is enticing. Looking forward to watching it too and see it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say to your point, so I mean, Renfro's probably up there as Carr's best receiver. Amari Cooper probably is in the mix, but yeah, I mean, nobody.
Talking about as far as Devontae Adams, those guys are good, but I don't think either one of those guys are Devontae.
Totally agree.
And maybe he's a little skewed because he's been with Aaron Rodgers too. I don't know, but I'm just, based on what I see on tape. But Renfro was a beast. Obviously, Amari was a beast, but I think Devontae just a different level of receiver as far as when you put everything together.
Totally agree. All right, now I want to ask you guys, from your experience, both of you guys a decade in the league, I'm sure, I didn't look it up, but I'm sure you guys dealt with management change, whether it was GM or head coach or whatever. And obviously, we touched on it briefly, but the Gruden debacle, they basically completely cleared house, even though the special teams coordinator came in as an interim and I thought did a good job. But they cleaned house, brought in McDaniels. Also, Dave Ziegler, this is his first time being a GM. Last time, his job last year, also with the Patriots, director of player personnel. Now it's his first time as a general manager. He's moved up the chain all the way from scout, player personnel assistant, all the way to GM as where he's at now. But I want to ask you guys, and I'll start with you, Link, in your experience, because I'm sure you've dealt with change, how difficult is it going into an off season when the whole system is different, the organization is different, the way things ran are different? Is it that much harder to be ready for the opening of the season, or is each season its own thing? So even if you have the same GM and head coach, it's the same way of preparing for week one?
Well, it's kind of a loaded question. And so I'll say this. I've been through many coaches changes, many GM changes throughout my career. Players do what players do. Just you're going through your progress. You're going through your off-season workouts. You're getting ready for the season. It is what it is. The only, coaches that come in, every coach that I've ever played for always wanted to say, look, buy into my system, buy into my program, follow me, and I will lead you to the promised land. And every coach has kind of subjected himself to that, or subjected the players to that. But the general manager, you don't really notice much from the general management change, because let's face it, I played with the Raiders and there was only one guy in charge. That was Al Davis. So I don't care how many general managers you think you might have. There's one guy in charge, and his name is Al Davis. So that's the only guy I knew as a general manager. So it is what it is. But players, players play, coaches coach, that type of thing. So when you're talking about this system that's going to change for the Raiders, where they're going, new management, the one it affects the most is the quarterback, Derek Carr. I mean, because he's going to have to change a system. He's going to have to undergo another offensive philosophy. And he's had quite a few since he's been a player with the Raiders. He's going to have to undergo a new offensive coordinator, a new offensive change. That's going to be the biggest change. If there's anybody else on that team, he's going to change the most, or have to change the most.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I want to talk about it from a different perspective, because if you're not the man, it's also a pretty big shift, because you could be without a job because you weren't a McDaniels guy, and I came in the league, I was one of undrafted, and I actually experienced this maybe my second or third year in the league as a bottom probably 5 to 7 guy, special teams guy, rotational guy, and you're worried about job security because I'm not this new dude's guy. So is he going to go in a different direction? Is he going to see what I've been putting on tape, right? And so it's a little bit more nerve-wracking in that regard. And then, later in my career, when I was more, as a veteran, more of a leader in the locker room, it was less about that than just understanding the culture and the new scheme, to Lincoln's point, as far as buy into this new way and whether or not I thought it was a good way or a bad way, and how did I feel about it, and how was I going to be able to pass that along the locker room. And so it can be hard, especially if you're not a proven guy. And then I could also say if you're a free agent too, right? GMs like certain guys, they're guys like Brandon Beane, for example, in Buffalo. If you notice the guys that he signed, a lot of them played in Carolina, where he came from. They get a lot of players from there. He pays those type of guys, right? And so are you one of his guys that he sees value in? Were you one of the guys that he brought in when he got there initially, when you came out on free agency? Those things can play a part as far as contract extensions and some other things. So it impacts the quarterback, I think, the most because of all the moving parts and him being successful on the field. But it also impacts some other guys that I guess people are not as aware of, as far as them getting their deals or them just having a job and opportunity to play in that organization moving forward.
Yeah, because Link, it sounds like, and again, your situation was different, Link, because you were with the Raiders, and like you said, there was only one guy really running that. It didn't matter that, what coaches changed or whatever. We all knew who was making the decisions there, so you were able to stick with the Raiders for the bulk of your career. Zoe, you had two different kinds of situations where you were with the Redskins and you dealt with a bunch of change, but you stuck around. And then it seems like with Zona, it might have been a situation where somebody new came in and you weren't their guy, and then it didn't work out. And then, of course, with the Bills, we all know.
Yeah. Right. And yeah, it works out like that. But Arizona was different, but that came down to relationship too. They actually brought me in with Steve Common and BA came in together, but I got hurt and I was older then. And then, I always forget my man's name. Outside backer, went to Michigan, played for Pittsburgh for a long time, came over, and he had BA, who was with Pittsburgh, knew him. And because I was seen as a guy that was hurt on the way out, they signed him and moved me. So relationships matter, on that end, as far as comfort level and how guys, because, if a coach is going to go down, they're going to go down with guys they know and trust and have some history with. And sometimes it's not even a person, not a knock on me. I just didn't have that background with BA and moved on, went to the Raiders, had opportunity to play for the hometown team and got healthy and ended my career the way it did. So it can work out for the benefit too, but they're all relational things. I think sometimes people have a sense that everything is a meritocracy in the league, and it's not. There's a lot of coaching circles and players' relationships that allow you to have a job a lot longer than maybe you've earned, or move on earlier than you should move on because you don't have that relationship. And you have to be able to navigate that. You have to understand that and be able to figure that out as a player. And understanding that makes it a little bit easier process when things don't work out moving forward. But it does matter.
So, Link, I want to talk to you on this. You touched on it a little bit, talking about, and Zoe did as well, saying that he played against New England. Josh McDaniels ran teams. Obviously, it did not work out for him in Denver. We don't need to bring up Tim Tebow, but in general, I don't know if I'm speaking for Raider Nation when I say this, but there's a little bit of trepidation anytime somebody plucks something from New England, thinking that because New England has been such a well-oiled, ran machine, that it's going to work somewhere else. And in a lot of cases, it is not. You've seen a lot of coordinators on both sides of the ball go to other places, and it hasn't worked out. And I'm just wondering, in general, do you think, because he's been such a great coordinator for New England, and it wasn't like he was horrible in Denver, but it didn't work out. He probably learned a lot from his time in Denver in terms of actually being the head coach as opposed to the offensive coordinator. They also bring a guy in to be their GM for New England. So now it's like New England West over in Las Vegas. I just wonder, Link, how do you feel about the regime change? And how do you think Raider Nation should feel about McDaniels getting a second chance of being a head coach?
Well, first of all, let me just say this. I was not the biggest Josh McDaniel fan when I heard about everything that happened from Indianapolis, the possibly getting the job, and, from New England and all that stuff. Look, I was not the biggest Josh McDaniel fan, but I understood why the hire happened. And I understood.
Oh, that's right. He backed out. I forgot about that.
And that's exactly right. So I understood why the hire happened, because he came in with a plan for Derek Carr. He came in with a plan to say, look, you have a pocket passer who doesn't like to run. I have a system which I can coach to make him thrive and not have to run. Gruden tried to get Derek Carr to run while he was there. He did everything in his power to get Derek Carr to run. And people like me who played under that system said one of the things that Derek Carr lacked was the fact that he would not use his legs. Rich Gannon thrived on using his legs when the time was open. And I thought Derek Carr had all the mobility, all the possibility, all the agility to do it. He just chose never to do it. And
hey, Link, how much do you think that has to do with the injury that DC had, though? Right, the ankle broke.
A big deal. No, it does have a great deal.
Yeah, because he used to run.
Yeah, he has the mobility, he has the capability, and you've even seen when he tries to show off when he pushes the ball forward or whatever the hell he does. Anyways, he has the ability. It just never came to fruition. So, and I think a lot of it has to do with that injury that he suffered in 2016. He didn't want to get hurt again. But at the same point, I digress when going back to Josh McDaniels. The reason why he was hired was because he had a plan for Derek Carr and a proven plan for Derek Carr to convince the owner that this is the reason why you should stay with this quarterback. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal, guys.
On top of that, we always think about Tom Brady, but he was able to do it this past year with Mac Jones, right, to the lesser extent. So I think that may even give him a little bit more credibility, because you could do anything with Tom Brady, but a rookie like Mac Jones and you find yourself in contention was a significant, I think, upgrade for Josh.
True story.
Yeah, and to your point, Link, the Dolphins hired Mike McDaniel from the 49ers, and a large part of that, because there's been all this talk, Herbert went after Tua, and everybody looks to that. They're forever going to be linked, and Dolphins fans are, they look at Herbert like a godsend and like we could have had him, but instead they took Tua, who was the more household name, if you will, went to Alabama, obviously came off the bench, won the national championship. But a large part of why the Dolphins hired Mike McDaniel is because when he came in for his interview, his whole interview was about basing his offense around Tua. And Stephen Ross, the owner down there, is in love with Tua. Now, Flores and the GM were not so much, but when McDaniel came in there, he came up with a whole game plan of this is what I'm going to do around Tua, and that's why they hired him. And that's kind of what Link is saying. McDaniel must have come in there and said, this is what I'm going to do around Carr, hence the extension, hence bringing in Adams. And so I'm a little bit more optimistic than I was when I first heard the signing. Obviously, we're going to have to see how it all plans out. But I think in anything in life, it's like riding a bike. And I think his experience from going from New England offensive coordinator, not having that much success as the Broncos head coach, going back to being the coordinator, and now having a fresh start being a head coach again, I think that Raider Nation should be more optimistic than pessimistic, as you probably would have originally been when you heard about the hiring.
If you think about it, look, you got to take it with a grain of salt. I mean, and I understand what Raider Nation feels, especially bringing over New England guys. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth. But at the same point, you think about it this way. You're able to keep your quarterback. You're in one of the more competitive divisions in the National Football League, and you've got an offense that is capable of putting up points. There's no reason why you shouldn't look forward to the season. It's that simple. There's really no reason why you shouldn't look forward to the season. I think the Raiders have got a chance at being successful. I don't know how much success they're going to have in this division, but it is, I tell you, they can definitely be competitive. I wish that they didn't, wait so long before the Broncos now have a quarterback. They've got a complete team. There's no doubt about it. They've got a complete team. Who knows how Russell Wilson's going to perform in that offense, but he's got some weapons around him. They've got some offensive line issues. The Chargers are competitive. They've been competitive the last couple of years, especially with their quarterback. They're going to continue to be competitive. We already know what the Chiefs are. So it's a toss-up. To be honest with you guys, it's a toss-up to see how competitive this team is going to be in this division. But they have everything they need to be. They have all the weapons they need to be competitive. They just have to go out there and do it.
Put a bow on it, Zoe. What's your outlook for the Raiders season? I mean, it's early, but this will be the last podcast we do until maybe August or September or whenever you guys can join me or whatever. But just right now, the draft is over. Free agency is pretty much over. How are you feeling about the silver and black in 2022?
Right. I think anytime you have stability at the quarterback position, right, you bring in a guy like Adams, you're going to have a big-time shot. And I think it all comes down from top down. Being in some of the best organizations is led by the head coach, the culture that he develops, and the consistency that he has day to day. I think to your point, with coaches that come from New England, typically they think that they are extensions of Bill Belichick, and they think they are in New England and can bring that way, where every organization, each team is so uniquely different. And plus, guess what? You're not Bill Belichick. You don't have 7 Super Bowl rings. And so hopefully, to your point, he's learned that. I think there's a lot of humility in some of his press conferences of things that he's learned, because talking to guys around the league that have played for other coaches, their biggest thing is that they act and talk and walk like they're Bill Belichick, but it's not them. And players can see through that, especially if you have guys that have played in New England. I know that's not you. You're not Bill. So if he comes in there with a renewed mindset as far as who he is, his identity, and does it his way, and obviously brings some of the principles, right? I think one of the biggest things, if he can bring up over just not beating yourself, that's why New England wins a lot of games. They don't beat themselves. So disciplined football team, obviously catering to Derek Carr and the skill set that he has, is going to put this team in an opportunity to win a lot of football games, because most teams in the NFL can't play 4 solid quarters of football without, penalties or beating themselves. And that's why New England was able to be so great for those years, because they capitalized on that. So I think they have a great chance. They have the great mixtures of quarterback, head coach, and defense, right? Because I think the offense is going to help the defense in a lot of ways. Go out there and be productive. Now it's all about putting it on the line and be able to do it consistently and staying healthy, in this division while you're doing it.
And my outlook is kind of a walking contradiction. I'm very optimistic about the team and their chances. I love Carr getting his college teammate back and one of the best wide receivers in Devontae Adams. I love bringing in Chandler Jones. I love their draft. I love a lot about this team outside of the offensive line. I love the whole regime change. I am optimistic about bringing McDaniel and the Patriot way over there. I think he's got a plan. I think he wants to do it right the second time. All those things are the good parts. The bad part is, good God, could their timing be any worse? Because the AFC is loaded. You got Tyreek Hill going to the Dolphins. You got Russell Wilson going from the Seahawks to the Broncos. You got Herbert, who's up and coming. The division is stacked. The whole conference is stacked. And I just worry that they're going to be really good with really bad timing. Like if they had this group 5-6 years ago when the AFC wasn't so stacked, I'd feel a lot better. But the AFC is so good. I could see them being great, but everybody's going to beat up on each other. So I just don't know how, all the cards are going to fall. And so we'll all see it. But I got to end on a light note, Link. I went to high school freshman year with Lorenzo Alexander. Now, he was a stud and was on varsity as a freshman. I was a bum and I played freshman football. Now, St. Mary's, for whatever reason, has a hair up there, for Piedmont High School. So we brought Zoe down from varsity for one game. I don't know if it was like a freshman championship or something, but I will never forget this. First of all, what position were you playing on VAR, Zoe?
I was a guard D tackle.
Okay, he was a guard D tackle on VAR. My freshman coach, I don't even know how this is legal. It probably wouldn't be legal now. We brought him down for one game against Piedmont, at Piedmont. And guess what position we played him, Link?
What position?
Running back.
Wow.
He must have ran for 400 yards and like 7 touchdowns. And we beat the dog you-know-what out of him. Anyways, I was wondering if you had any kind of similar story like that where like you just were totally used as like just a weapon.
You know what? I don't. The only thing I can remember is that when I first started playing football, I was a sophomore in high school, and the first 3 games I had to play in regular tennis shoes. I didn't have cleats. I
couldn't find those shoes big enough.
Yeah, exactly right. We wore size 7.
Damn.
I couldn't find any shoes. So the first 3 games I played in varsity where I was regular tennis shoes, and
That's crazy.
It was funny to me because, when going out there and slipping and sliding and doing everything you can to try to get some traction, I couldn't because I didn't have cleats. And so that's
what size shoe did you wear?
Size 17.
Damn! I wear 13 and it's hard to get shoes. 17?
17.
Damn.
Of course, we're going back to the 80s, guys, and we didn't have the internet. We didn't have. It took a while for me to get some shoes. And matter of fact, my coach had to go. I think he got them from the Chargers. He eventually got some cleats from the Chargers at the time in San Diego. Finally, they had a hand-me-down pair of cleats, and that was my very first cleats. So
that's crazy. That's crazy. All right, gentlemen. Well, I thank both of you brothers. You've been so good to me over the years. Link, I've known you less time than I've known Zoe, but both of you guys have been great to me. Thank you for joining me. On Twitter, follow Lincoln Kennedy at LKennedy72. And again, if you're bored, look up the coincidence between the presidents Lincoln and Kennedy. And then Lorenzo Alexander is at One Man Gang 97. On Twitter. Follow them both. Follow me at Zach Sports, ZAK Sports. It's been the Silver and Zach podcast, and hopefully I'll get these gentlemen to join me when it comes training camp time and cuts and final rosters and preseason and all that good stuff. Thank you again, gentlemen, both. Have a great day.